Our next guest says that Musk really had no choice but to stick with his original offer all along. Joining us to break this down and to talk about what a Musk-led Twitter could look like is Jim Stewart. He's a CNBC contributor and a New York Times columnist. By the way, Jim, we should also point out to people, on top of being a great author and so many other things, you're a graduate of Harvard Law School, so you know what you're going to speak about in some of these legal issues, too.
Yes, that's correct.
Let's just pick up on where Robert left off. Is there wiggle room in this? Does Twitter, because the judge today actually said that she's going to continue to press on towards trial. They are still negotiating on both sides to come up with something. What does this mean? What does this legalese mean? And how sure should investors be about this deal going through?
Well, obviously, they're not going to stop the trial until there is an actual deal. And from everything that I've heard and read about it, Twitter is taking a very hard line. I mean, for one thing, look, they're not giving him any concession on the price, and they're also insisting that there be no new contingencies, that this be a surefire thing, and they're holding out for that. And I think they can do that because they have the winning hand. I mean, I and other people I've been talking to have been scratching our heads ever since Musk pulled out of this, thinking on what legal theory did he expect that he could wriggle out of this deal? I have not heard a plausible one. You know, he's been throwing up, various sort of red herrings, like, oh, there were fake accounts, they misrepresented something. He had locked himself into a very firm deal. And in my estimation, none of that was going to prevail in court. So the legal implications of that are either he was going to lose. I'm sure his lawyers told him he was going to lose. And either the judge, after he spent millions of dollars in the litigation, would order him to go through with the deal, or more likely, because judges don't like to do that, would assess the damages that he has caused Twitter by making the bid and then withdrawing. And all you have to do there is start by measuring the price between what he was promising to pay and where Twitter was trading after he pulled out. And you could see he was looking at billions of dollars in damages. So I think for him, he really had no choice. Billions of dollars in damages, and then he doesn't get the company anyway? So you get charged that fine? No, he has nothing. Yeah. He pays the damages, and he has absolutely nothing to show for it. That would be a crazy outcome and a terrible one for him personally, both financially and in terms of, any credibility he would have in the market. So I think he really, really did have his back up against the wall here. And honestly, I think he got good legal. If indeed his lawyers said, look, you're going to lose this case, I think he got good legal advice, because I think he was going to lose it. Obviously he hasn't done the deal yet, so we may still get this trial, but I can't imagine that scenario happening. But if the judge is proceeding with this trial, he was supposed to get deposed tomorrow. Does that get put off? That's a good question. Typically, I think it would depend on how close they are to a deal. It doesn't make any sense to go ahead and depose him if they really are close. If not, and I'm Twitter, I'd say yes, absolutely. Get him in there and keep the pressure on. They have every incentive to do that until he actually does enter into this final agreement. It's fun to watch Twitter and see Elon's responses to these things. He responded to one kind of crazy idea today that was floated, one of these crazy ideas where somebody said, during these negotiations, you should flex your muscle and your ability to be able to float a rocket over the opposing people's houses. And he responded back that, yeah, not a bad idea, something along those lines. Well, I have to say, as a journalist, as opposed to a lawyer here, I was looking forward to the trial. There's going to be, it would have been very interesting, and I'm sure a lot of material would have come out. Another point I think that nobody's really focused on so much is that he was acting like this Twitter whistleblower was going to be the salvation in his effort to pull out. Like the whistleblowers are saying, oh my God, there's fraud, there's all this going on inside the company. But if you look at what the whistleblower actually said, none of it did Musk any good. The whistleblower was saying that Twitter wasn't doing enough to stop additional fake accounts. He never claimed that Twitter had misstated the number of fake accounts. In fact, he specifically said they had not. Twitter has been filing audited financial statements for years, and I think we have to give them the benefit and assume that those are accurate. There are severe penalties if you misstate things in an audit financial statement. Very quickly, just as a supposition, what do you think the new Twitter looks like under Elon Musk, assuming this deal does go through? Because he's talking about some pretty grand plans at this point. Well, some of the grand plans that I'm hearing him talk about, like the one app or that sort of thing.
One
good
app
luck
to
to
rule
him.
them all.
I'll concede he is he is a genius. He has gone places that everyone else has feared to tread with great success. So, I compliment him for that. But do you think Twitter hasn't thought of this before? They've got a lot of smart people there, starting with Jack Dorsey, number one. Secondly, the one thing I think we can be confident in, he has a very strong libertarian streak. He does not like government interference. He doesn't like the SEC telling him what he can or cannot say. He doesn't like having to comply with the SEC regulations. It will be a libertarian Twitter, which means, I think it's going to be a free for all, that a lot of people who can't get on there now will be there, starting with, the former president. And the question, I think, will be, what will that do to mainstream Twitter users? Now, Twitter does have a very strong, so-called network effect. People want to be on there because that's the biggest audience, and then vice versa. That's something Twitter has going for it. So I think he has some leeway there. But if he goes too far, if it gets taken over by extremists, it's going to alienate the mainstream users. I think that's the risk.
Well, it will be fun and interesting to watch. And Jim, my friend, it's good to see you. Thank you.
Likewise. Thanks, Becky.
Okay.